I'll call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is an open meeting of the Seward, Nebraska governing body. The city is certified by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act in conducting business. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is displayed on the north wall of this meeting room facility as required. Disclosure of meeting recording processes is posted in the meeting room. A participant sign-in sheet is available for use by any citizen addressing the council. Presenters shall approach the podium, state their name and address for the clerk's record, and are asked to limit remarks to 5 minutes. All remarks shall be directed to the mayor, who shall determine by whom any appropriate response shall be made. The city shall reserve the right to adjust the order of items on this agenda if necessary and may elect to take action on any of the items listed. Please call the roll.
Beck.
Here.
Colterman.
Present.
Streisand.
Here.
Camper.
Here.
Singleton.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Wilkin.
Here.
All right, first 6 items consist of this evening's consent agenda.
Move it through.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor: Wilkin, Beck, Camper, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks, 8-0.
All right, next we have our public hearings. First public hearing is consideration of an ordinance approving the preliminary and final plat of Knox Addition. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, council. All right, this is review of a major subdivision preliminary and final plat, as the mayor stated. If you'll notice on preliminary plat, it consists of 3 lots, 2 lots and an outlot. The final plat consists of just lot 1 at this point. As development goes on and warrants, then lot 2 and possibly that outlot will be final platted at that time. Drainage, there's no issue with drainage, fairly flat out there. Once we get a permit and development begins, then we will take another look at drainage for impervious surface as the building and parking lots go in. We don't need a subdivision agreement, as all the utilities currently run by the property, all roads lead to the property. This subdivision is also in combination with a rezone and a voluntary annex to come later.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim?
Can you reiterate the planning and zoning actions?
As far as,
They were approved, right?
oh, I'm sorry, yes, they were all recommended, sorry.
Any questions? Any other waiting questions?
Sorry.
Threw me off guard.
Record. If not, for a moment, we'll go over the public comment portion of this public hearing, and we can return to the council if any further questions or comments. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on this item? Please come forward. Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Todd Lorenz, 9110 Whispering Road, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm appearing on behalf of Arthur Knox, who's the applicant for the subdivision application. Art's owned the land for a good number of years and been working with Jonathan to solicit potential users for the property. I think we found one here. It's going to be a good user. It's Summit Contracting. They're from South Dakota, is their home base. They primarily do agribusiness work. So they build grain bins, machine sheds, that kind of stuff for farmers and ag-related industries. So we looked around, you know, a good area when we were looking for a site. Looked in the county of Seward, looked at the few options there. We landed here on Isaac Walton Road. I think the big draw was with their employees, they wanted to be close to town. They like the services within Seward, like the community as far as hopefully some of their employees will live here eventually. So I think it'll be a good situation for both them and hopefully you as a city of Seward. As Tim mentioned, he did a good job. It's a pretty straightforward application. The land is pretty much fully served by utilities already, paved road in front, next to industrial zoning on the east, so we're just kind of an extension of that. So we ask for your support. We got unanimous approval or recommendation from the Planning Commission and just here to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Todd? As those of you who don't know, so Todd was with Olson Associates when we originally started the Rail Campus project. And he was very instrumental in helping us get that off the ground, so. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Jessica, did you have anything?
No.
You good? Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Todd. Anyone else from the public wish to comment on this item? Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Jonathan Jank with the Seward County Chamber and Development Partnership. Yes, and great to see Todd. As I mentioned at Planning Commission, it's fun when you're in an industry long enough that everything kind of comes full circle. What I have here by Tim is actually the master plan. Just to give you a quick history on this, we're really trying to develop more commercial industrial sites across the county to be more attractive, because the reality is the rail campus is a wonderful site, but it can't be all things to all people. And so we need to cultivate other commercial industrial sites to grow the community and the county. So this is actually a partnership with Nebraska Public Power District with their Site Ready Assistance Program to do a master planning process. Half of the money came from NPPD, the other half came from ARPS. And so the goal was to try to attract a user here, and that's exactly what Todd shared. We're excited about Summit Contracting. That was actually a lead from a local contact here, so they have some ties to the community, and we're excited to help Seward continue to strategically grow through this project. And so we'd ask for your consideration for support. After, if this would go through, we'll have about 20 additional acres that would be available for future growth. And so the goal would be to continue to develop west over time on the site. So we'd be happy to answer any questions and would appreciate your consideration for support.
Any questions or comments for Jonathan? Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else from the public wish to comment on this item? Please come forward at this time. Seeing no one else, and I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and return to Tim if there's any questions or comments for Tim. If not, I would ask someone to introduce the ordinance.
I'll introduce the ordinance.
An ordinance to approve the plat entitled Knox Edition, a plat of land located in the northwest 1/4 of section 29, township 11 north, range 3 east of the 6 p.m. Seward County, Nebraska, as hereinafter set forth, to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form, to provide for a time when this ordinance shall take effect. The ordinance has been read by title and is designated as ordinance number 2022-8, and the title is hereby approved. Could we do
This one you can.
we can, okay.
Yep.
So I need a motion to dispense with statutory rule.
I so move. Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilken, Beck, Camperth, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks, 8-0.
Again, this is ordinance number 2022-8. Would anyone like to move that this ordinance be passed and adopted as read?
So moved.
Second.
The motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question is, shall ordinance number 2022-8 be finally passed and adopted? Please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilken, Beck, Camperth, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks, 8-0.
All right, thank you. Item number 2.
Yep.
Okay.
Rezone.
Yes. So this is consideration of an ordinance rezoning property.
Major subdivision application.
Does that be separate?
There's no, we don't have to do anything with the application because there's no subdivision improvement agreement, correct?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Just making sure.
One is not required.
Yeah.
Utilities
So,
we're good.
so we
streets
can
are
just
already
move past that.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay,
We're good.
just making sure. Perfect. All right, thanks, Tim. Then item number 2, public hearing. This is consideration of an ordinance rezoning property identified as Lot 1, Knox Edition from agricultural district to I-2, general industrial district. Tim?
If you note, lot 1 is now only 15.71 acres. Ag zoning requires a minimum of 20 acres. We looked at the zoning as Jonathan said, and as Todd mentioned, that it's all industrial and agricultural down there. I-2, Industrial 2 is what they've asked to be zoned to. That's contiguous with Tenneco to the east and then the box factory to the west. So I was asked at Planning Commission why I-2 instead of I-1. I-2 allows for a little bit bigger equipment, outdoor storage. You don't have to park as much stuff indoors, and with the equipment that they're using, it just fit I-2 a little bit better than I-1. Currently, the property is located outside of the city limits. There is a voluntary annexation request that we will look at next so that they can bring that property within the city limits.
All right, thank you, Tim. Are there any questions or comments from the council for Tim? Seeing none this time, I will go to open up the public comment portion of the public hearing. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on item number 2, please come forward at this time. Seeing no one, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and return to the council for any further discussion. First, someone would like to introduce the ordinance.
I'll introduce the ordinance.
All right, an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Seward, Nebraska to rezone certain property within the extraterritorial jurisdiction of the city of Seward, Nebraska, now zoned agricultural district to I-2 general industrial district, specifically tracts of land north of Walker Road and east of 294th Road, to describe the property rezoned, to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form, and to provide for a time when this ordinance shall take effect. The ordinance has been read by title and is designated as ordinance number 2022-9. The title is hereby approved, and I need a motion to dispense with statutory rule.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilken, Beck, Camperth, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks, 8-0.
Again, this is ordinance number 2022-9. Would anyone like to move that this ordinance be passed and adopted as read?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question is, shall ordinance number 2022-9 be finally passed and adopted? Please register your vote. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Wilken, Beck, Camperth, Colterman, Miller, Singleton, Streisand, Hendricks, 8-0.
Thank you. Item number 3 is also a public hearing. This is consideration of a voluntary annexation of Lot 1, Knox Edition. Tim?
All right, in your packet, you'll see a signed letter from Arthur Knox asking to be annexed into the city limits. Summit has asked to be attached to city utilities, and in order to do that, we have to bring them into the city limits. So that's why they are requesting this annexation. With that letter, my understanding, has to be read at least 3 times, 3 different meetings, so pretty straightforward.
Great. Is there any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, I'll go to open up the public comment portion of this public hearing. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on item number 3 at this time? Seeing no one, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and return to the council for any further discussion. Or if someone would like to introduce the ordinance.
I'll introduce the ordinance.
And again, this will just be the first reading. An ordinance declaring the annexation of certain contiguous and adjacent tracts of land, urban and suburban in character, more specifically Lot 1, Knox Edition, to the city of Seward, to the corporate limits of the city of Seward, Nebraska, and extending the limits thereof accordingly, to describe the real estate to be annexed and its boundaries, to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form, to provide for a time when this ordinance shall take effect. So that'll be the first reading, and then we'll do this again in the future. All right, with that, we'll move on to item number 4. This is a public hearing, revision of the 1 and 6 year street improvement plan. Thanks, Todd. Have a good evening. Mike, welcome.
Good evening. So you have a number of handouts printed out in front of you that were included in the packet. We include this 2-page 1 and 6 year plan in tablet form. Then you also have 2 memos here, which I'll describe a little bit later, and some brief notation. And then there are 2 maps. Essentially, the first one is the projects on the 1 year plan. The second one is the projects on the 6 year following. So the 1 year, that's fiscal year 2023, starting October 1, running through September 30th of next year, and then the subsequent 6 years, fiscal years 2024 through 2029. So to describe, I'll quickly go through some of these projects here. The first section at the top is 4 projects listed in the first section are completed. So these are projects that should be rolling off, completed before the end of this fiscal year, September 30th. We have Waverly Road, we're down to just lane marking on that project, and that should finish off. The Elm Street Railroad Crossing has already been completed. Pinewood Avenue, we have split this into 2 projects. So between Columbia and Meadow Lane, Bob Meyer's crew has been this summer, if you've gone down Pinewood, they've been replacing sections of pavement that they can do without additional storm sewer, additional subgrade work. And so they're doing a fine job. It's very economical for them to do that. They like doing the work, and the work is turning out really well. So it's a very, very efficient way when you can to pave those with our streets crew. And then the alley between 5th and 6th hasn't been started, but as soon as Bob's crew is finished with Pinewood, they'll move on to that one alley. And that alley needs paving primarily because it's so steep, and it becomes a maintenance problem on Ash Street as heavy rainfalls carry the aggregate to the bottom of the hill and gets into the storm inlets and causes maintenance issues. So then in the next section, the 1-year plan, there's 8 projects listed there, and below that, the 6-year plan, we have 16 of 36 on the first page, and projects 17 through 36 on the second page. Last section, long-range plan, bottom of the second sheet, essentially are projects that we have identified that will roll up into subsequent 6-year plans, we think, in the near term, and we just use that as a way of creating a concept and a discussion as to what may be moving upwards. So this is the plan. So between the last couple of years and this year, projects do shift around. If you note in the 6-year plan, project number 11 is Pinewood Avenue. And so we actually had that in this fiscal year to be constructed. For a variety of reasons, we split it. I just mentioned Bob's crew is doing the one portion between Columbia and Meadow Lane. The other portion needs a lot more engineering work done. Also, Pinewood from 2nd Street to the highway is going to become the bypass for the Highway 15 project starting in 2024. So we've deferred that project until after Highway 15 is complete. So part of the purpose of this year by year is to readjust where necessary. So the primary purpose of the 1-year plan then is to tackle those projects that we need done prior to Highway 15. So we essentially are doing the engineering work now. We'll let those projects out this year, late summer or fall, for construction next year. We really need them complete, hopefully by the fall of next year, in advance of the April 2024 start of Highway 15. So in the 1-year plan, those are projects 3 and 4, Park Avenue from 6th to 8th Street. So there's an existing 36-inch pipe, and for all of you that have lived here for a long period of time and seen some heavy rain, Cedar Street and Park Avenue turn into a storm sewer itself on the surface. And so the state had identified a couple years back the deficiencies in the city's storm sewer system, so we are addressing that. We're actually putting 2 additional 36-inch pipes beneath Park Avenue. We'll repave that, pave over that, and then reconstruct the existing 36-inch from 7th to 8th Street. New structure at the end at 8th Street that discharges then into the waterway, the open channel that's west of 8th Street. So projects 3 and 4 are both significant in cost. They're dominating this next 1-year plan. Project 1, East Seward Street, again, we had targeted that for this last fiscal year, and due to engineering reasons and the ability to get a contractor, we've moved that to the 1-year plan. The plans are very nearly finished, so I think in the next couple of city council meetings, the final plans will be presented here for approval, and that construction hopefully would start, at least the utility portion of it, late fall, perhaps early spring, and we hope to see that project completed next year. That project should not interfere with the Highway 15 project. Other projects, the second alley, Project 5, again, this will be Bob's crew. So throughout the 1 and 6 year plan, the 7 years, we do try to target at least one significant project of a block or 2 blocks worth of paving that Bob's crew can do. And really for them to fit that into their normal cycle of work, you know, that can take a couple of weeks or maybe up to 2 months, interspersed with the other work that they have to do. Project number 6 is an open channel. That project has been moved back a couple of years. We just haven't been able to get to that. Projects 7 and 8 are new. We've known about these, but we need them in this particular street CIP budget, so they're presented here for the first time. Project 7 is a small storm sewer project in the business park of the rail campus. The lots are starting to sell out there, and so we need, while we still have access, we need to install that storm sewer pipe and restore that ground before everybody builds up around it. Number 8, Plum Creek. There's a short section of the existing bike trail that's being threatened as Plum Creek moves during heavy storms, and it's threatening to undermine that trail. So what Bob's crew is going to do is pave a new section farther away from the existing Plum Creek. Ultimately, we'll probably have to do something in terms of bank stabilization. That's not in this 1 and 6 year plan at all. We'll have to work with Army Corps of Engineers. That's something way into the future, I believe. So moving on to the 6 year plan.
Go back to the 1 year.
I'm sorry?
Go back to the 1 year.
Sure.
How come Evergreen isn't listed? I thought that was gonna be before.
Evergreen is actually, good question, is part of Project 1. It's been wrapped in with Project 1. So East Seward Street. East Seward Street will be built in 3 phases. So the east-west portion will be 1 phase, the north-south portion, which we will rename to Prairie Flower from the highway up to where the leaves are at the east end of East Seward Street, and the 3rd phase will be Evergreen. And so we won't allow multiple phases to be road closures in each of those phases at one time. And so that's where that project will end up. So it should be in the next fiscal year rebuilt.
And Mike, this is great. I do appreciate putting this all together for the council. I know when, if you remember back when a number of years, this didn't look like this. You know, we had some projects that were on the 1 year plan that were on the 1 year plan for like 40 years. And part of the concern, what it did was it gave citizens a false impression of what the priorities were, and that street has since been paid, but it took a while. And so, you know, my goal has always been to make sure that if it's in the 1 year plan, that it's actually being constructed. And then the 6 year plan are legitimate projects that we intend to move forward on at some point, but they won't be constructed in the next fiscal year. So this is, I think, is really good for the council and for the public to be able to see here's the thought process as far as future projects go, without confusing the public as to what the true priorities are. So I appreciate you doing it like this, Mike.
So good, thanks. So we do have in the 3rd to last column to the right, estimated construction year, and so I have in the 6 year plan divided those up in order of years we anticipate. Of course, we can move those forward and backwards. And then if you look at the project numbers, 2nd column from the left, as they are added to our 1 and 6, we used to have to force to do this by the state. We have sequential numbers, right? So they're running 131 to 232, I think, at this point in time. And of course, the most recent projects, the newest ones added this year are 225 through 231 or 232 on this list. So you can kind of follow. So the older projects, if you flip the 2nd page, and you look at project number 20, it's M39, 131 Park Avenue from 11th to 12th Street. This had actually been in our 1 year for a period of time. There's a number of reasons why. We think the city crew is gonna actually pave that section. However, we found out that there wasn't enough right-of-way for that short stretch. So we're gonna have to probably acquire the channel, actually build a box culvert channel out of concrete, so the creek there will be totally enclosed, and that will prevent the road that we construct from being undermined. And so right now, it's an alley, basically that's what it is. There's not enough room right now for a typical curb-to-curb dimension. But that's an example as why that old project gets pushed back. And so we have more work to do, and we have to work with the Army Corps of Engineers on that project. Going back to the 6-year plan, then priority 1, of course, the whole 1 and 6 is being dominated by the state project, $10 million. The city only has to kick in an estimated $300,000 for a row of parking that's along the west side of the courthouse square. The rest of the project is funded entirely by the state, so it's quite a benefit to the city. However, we do have work beforehand and afterwards, primarily in storm drainage. And so we've been working with the state. Project number 2 is East Hillcrest, and again, this was initially earlier. We had moved it for both budgetary reasons as well as not having more than one road croquet, as an example, under construction at one time. And so this has been moved that same year, and I think the East Hillcrest from East Ridge to the bridge, 2024, same year, Highway 15 will be a good year. And we have an open year with budget. We're having a huge project with Highway 15 that's not hitting our street budget. And so it's a good year to do East Hillcrest. We did get identified with the Plum Creek Bridge, and we funded 100% by the federal government. That project is currently in design. We're halting it at the end of preliminary design, and then we're going to submit the preliminary design to the state. The question is whether they'll retain the engineer that we hired for that design project, continue with full design. There's a environmental study that has to be done prior to final design starting. And so they'll look at wetlands, they'll look at archaeological sites, potential endangered species, and that plan, once finished, then allow them to design properly. We don't anticipate anything happening with that study, but it has to be done. And the state's told us that roughly a 3-year period of time for both the environmental study as well as final design. So we anticipate construction of the Plum Creek Bridge in 2026. And so again, East Hillcrest and some of these other projects are moved around to acknowledge that when that bridge will be actually built. So again, probably $2 million federally funded project, big benefit to the city. Final design will be covered. We may not be able to recoup our costs that we've already incurred. Number 3 on this list is Lindell, from Jackson to East Seward. Again, this is a partially paved, essentially a little bit of asphalt and a lot of gravel on that stretch. This project here, we've got the surveying done. We have a proposal for the geotech work that should be done. There's going to be a lot more storm sewer around that bank than we initially anticipated. So we're likely to get a consulting engineer to actually design that short project for us. And again, we think that's 2024 is a good year, won't interfere with the highway project. But as we go through this, these are all sequenced in the same fashion throughout the 6 years. And I just want to highlight in the last few minutes the projects that we've identified in these 2 memos. One is the brick reconstruction. So we have 2.2 miles of brick, and a lot of the brick streets, including 7th Street out here, are reaching the end of their useful life. There's a concrete base and a sand layer, and where that pavement has failed, the concrete has broken up to where it's simply aggregate at this point in time. It's not a cohesive subgrade. So what we're proposing at this point in time is 2 small projects to be pilot projects. One would be the intersection of Seward and 4th Street. And so if you go by there now, you can see that there's a lot of storm sewer inlets and pipe beneath that intersection. It's collapsing, and we have to figure out something to do. So that would be reconstructing that one intersection. Some of the storm sewer extends to 5th Street. We don't know exactly how far. We'll have to go to the west. We propose that be one test area where we aim to reconstruct the brick as is. The second one is project number East Seward Street 8. East Seward from Columbia down the hill to Lindell. And so the proposal here is to rebuild that street in kind. essentially rebuild it entirely, a new base. It'd be a concrete layer, followed by a sand layer of 2 inches, followed by additional bricks on top. Whether we reuse the bricks, we get new bricks. But we'd still have concrete curb and gutter sections on both sides, 2-foot sections, essentially the same road width, curb to curb now, same materials. And then of course we would take care of the sanitary sewer. And so the idea would be to, through these 2 projects, identify what it's like to rebuild these streets, apply that knowledge then to the rest of our brick streets and see how much. I'm anticipating that the cost will be multiples of what replacing with modern concrete, paid by machine. But obviously we don't want to get rid, I believe we don't want to get rid of all of our brick streets, and so this will help us out. So there's a couple communities, McCook and Omaha, that currently have projects let that are reconstructing brick streets. Ideas, communicate with them, identify some contractors, and use these 2 test projects. In that memo, there's a 3rd project listed, and that was project 13 here on the first page, 8th Street. And 8th Street from Hillcrest down to Park Avenue, and then it includes also reconstruction of the concrete portion of Hillcrest from 7th Street to 8th, and then from Ironwood, which is part of Fairway Woods, down to 8th Street as well. Right now, there's no storm sewer. It uses 8th Street, essentially the surface, for that to get down to the channel at Park Avenue. And so we have this project in design. We've split it off so that we do not complicate the Highway 15 project and unburden it. Currently, that stretch of 8th Street from Park Avenue to Hillcrest, just a little past Hillcrest, is brick. And so before this project, it was slotted here because the idea is, before we build this project, we'll use those other 2 projects to kind of decide, well, is this a stretch of Brick Street we want to reconstruct, or do we want to abandon this as brick and then pave it with concrete, as we do most of our streets? And so from that point forward, then, project by project, we can make decisions. So that's the proposal, short pilot program, and we can always change what we do in the future, based on these 2 projects. So 4th and Seward is 2024 fiscal year, not next year, but the year after. And then East Hillcrest would be the year after that. So sequenced, and we think this is as quickly as we can get these projects done. Of course, with Lindell and Jackson, we want to get that project also done 2024 fiscal year ahead of potentially East Seward, and not close both at the same time. So essentially, that's how we've built this. And one last item is from the East Seward transportation issues that we have talked about since the beginning of the year, especially with the new development along East Seward. We have added 2 projects, and the project on the second sheet here, project 18, Bluff Road. This would be from the Plum Creek Bridge out to 252nd Street. And then project 22, which is 252nd Street from Bluff Road down to the highway. And we think that because there's an existing road base already there, it would be built initially as we anticipate as a rural section, and it'd be the most economical. We wouldn't have that much storm sewer modifications to do it, and we can get a lot for our budget. We can get a lot of lane miles constructed. Typically not entirely county roads at this point in time, not something we would typically put in cities' 1- and 6-year plan. We do anticipate there will be shared funding, and so that's why we've included here. Other projects from East Seward have been put into a long-range plan. Of course, over the next several years, we can decide, how to shift other projects into the 6-year plan. So, with that, a rapid explanation. You have to
Thanks, Mike.
On the brick projects, either the pilot or perhaps going forward to other brick projects, have you identified, or are there possibilities of any type of grant funding or help, assistance, any of that?
I have not found any type funding for that type of thing.
Because you said it was gonna be multiples cost, I thought.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Again, I think this next several years, with a lot of infrastructure funding, is probably our best opportunity, but I haven't seen in terms of preserving historic. We looked at one program that was reconnecting communities, And I attended a webinar put on by the U.S. Department of Transportation. Again, they were looking for inner cities where interstates have obliterated minority neighborhoods and actually take out that spur. So we constantly look for opportunities in the federal programs, and sometimes until you spend some time looking at that particular funding mechanism, until you learn what they're actually targeting. So potentially there's something that comes up, we have not seen it.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, my question, do you think we need to put some of these projects that the taxpayers are concerned about with the growth east, do you think we need to put those a little further up in long range? You know, maybe some, you know, we talked about the road there going out by the old John Deere because of the extra traffic that's gonna be congesting, the concern on East Seward Street with the residents. Don't you think that we should be moving that up instead of long range?
Well, some of the projects, I think, so take one Prairie Flower, so from the east end of East Seward Street, the east-west portion, and cutting north through the Leaves property, the Hofer's property, and the G's property of Bluff Road was one identified would be ideal. Seems to be at this point premature. So the Hofers and the G's are not prepared, and the Leaves are not prepared to develop at this point in time, would be unwilling. And there's really no houses around there for that particular project. So it's on the long range plan. We've talked about a couple others. You mentioned the one where we're extending essentially East Seward to the west, connecting up with Crooked Mile Road, if I understand the project. That's a possibility on here. We can certainly add it. It seems to be a road that would not serve too many individuals at all. When we did do the public input, it did not gain as much support as expected. So it's not that alone, it's just a group of stakeholders that we targeted, but most of the positive responses were actually from people that would not use that road. So it was those guys, that's a road for them, not for me. So we have to take that on account. So in particular, there's a couple reasons why that one didn't pop up here. We certainly can add it. It just seemed like, at least from the administration's point of view, that the two that we have identified provide the best amount of relief long-term,
Well,
and setting up for others.
But if we add 170 houses to the east, that's not gonna have enough attention? Obviously there has to be, no, they're not all gonna take East Seward as an example street. So I think that's the question. So, you know, some of this is an unknown. It's not that we cannot. The one project we've identified in that gained a lot of favor was coming north off the roundabout and connecting up with East Hillcrest. And of course, that is the most expensive of the projects. And so $6.5 million and no abutting households. And so, again, that is certainly any of those projects are possibilities for moving forward with. We've put the ones in that we felt at first blush were the ones that would benefit the most city residents.
And Mike, there'll be like traffic studies, there's
Sure.
gonna be a lot more data as houses start going in. I mean, right now Prairie Flower is not paved. You know, we don't know, I mean, I know just anecdotally people in Ridge Run don't go that route because it's not paved. They don't wanna drive on that section of it. So once it's paved, it becomes a more viable option. And, you know, until we have the houses in place, it's just, and I know sometimes it seems counterintuitive. You know, when the middle school was moving up to Waverly Road, people were like, well, why aren't you guys paving Waverly Road? Well, we can't pave it until the school's there because the school needs to be there for the traffic to go up so the traffic can be counted to justify the expense to the state. So a lot of this has to be done in a linear fashion. And so, you know, once we have a better idea of what's actually happening and we have the data to support it, we can come back with a more detailed plan for other options, if at that time we feel those options are necessary. But it's way, you know, too early in that process to to add entirely new roads until we have something, and it's gonna be phased in. If you're concerned about the new subdivision, I mean, we're talking a number of years before that actually gets done, and houses get built.
I mean, I understand, Josh, it's just, there was a lot of concern with East Seward, that with Ridge Run going up East Seward Street, and we were looking at some way to distract them from going up East Seward, and I just thought that would be a opportunity.
No, and I'm not saying it's not on the table, it's just to build a brand new road somewhere, you're talking about millions of dollars, and so I kinda wanna wait to make sure that we have the data to support those types of projects, cause right now, we don't have that data. Right now, it's just speculative, but, that doesn't mean that need won't be there, we just don't have the data right now to support that.
So, just a question on the two that you're talking about. Well, they're both M 539.
It's the city's designation from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
state.
So, when you did the traffic studies on Columbia, if I remember right, that was like 5,000?
About 6,000 in that range.
And then Sixth Street was like 9,000, right, north and south?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I realize the cost of putting a street in where there's no development, but like on the one that would go from Prairie Flower to Bluff, and then eventually maybe to Waverly. Is the data that exists on Columbia and Sixth Street, north-south, enough impetus? I mean, to justify at least, you know, some fairly proactive planning, you know? I don't wanna,
So that first
exercise eminent domain or anything like that, but it just seems to me that right now, we have a bottleneck at Columbia and Sixth Street. And as this development grows and more people are coming into that part of town, it seems to me that we will need to be looking at something else fairly realistically out in that direction.
Mike, if I may, so if we're looking at Columbia and Sixth Street, one of our issues with the road that comes out of East Seward down to Crooked Mile Road is if all those neighbors are going out that way, but they're actually just going up north, well, guess where they're going to anyway? Columbia.
Right.
So we've not solved that problem, but we've spent $1 million, and at the point we reconnect them directly north with like a Prairie Flower, now we've spent $1 million plus to build a road that's undevelopable because it's in the floodplain essentially, and no one's using it anymore. It's really reduced down to a local roadway.
However,
But-
it was to alleviate some traffic off of Seward Street is what I thought also.
Yes, but you're spending your question is you're spending $1 million to add more traffic that's still gonna go to Columbia versus reducing all the Lincoln traffic that's coming in, cause now they're bypassing Columbia entirely. They're going up 252nd, they're going down Hillcrest Bluff Road, and then heading north to the wellness center, the middle school, the neighborhoods, the churches, the elementary school, whatever. And so I think that plan will alleviate traffic
sure.
on Columbia. Now, East Seward would be different.
Right.
I think one of the ones that's the most important on here, and I can't tell you it's the best one, but it's important, and the reason you may want to have it on your 1 and 6 is probably Prairie Flower. And the reason being is it has the most potential of the options you had, that if somebody got ambitious and started developing, and you had it in your 1 and 6, you could have general idea where you want it to go. You can point at your 1 and 6 in your comp plan and say, hey, as you guys develop, you need to build this, and then it wasn't built on the taxpayer's dollar. It's built on the developer's dollar.
And
But it needs to
Prairie
be-
Flower, is that the north-south section
Yes.
of what we now call East Seward Street,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's some of the give and the take, but if you actually identify it in your 1 and 6, then you can help solicit for funds for it, and you can point, if a developer comes in, Lee, G, if any of those guys decide they wanna do something, then you can say, hey, we have this in our 1 and 6, and so as you develop, you need to build this roadway in there, and it needs to be part of your development to reconnect all this and provide north-south access.
Well, the reason we haven't included it now is, I think, to Mike's point, is that there isn't an interest by them to do that. And so unless you're willing to, you know,
for them.
Well, you'd use eminent domain to acquire it, and then you would use taxpayer dollars to build it, as opposed to, I know it's less convenient and we have less control over the timing, but it makes a lot more fiscal sense to wait until until they are wanting to do the development, because then the onus can be on them to pay for that, even though we would tell them more or less where the road would go.
Is there ever a chance that we could get some funding like we did with Carroll K to put a road in where there's no development? There never is gonna be a development, but.
It's potential, the reason why that happened, not to pull that scab off, but the reason why that happened at the time was because it was low on our priority list,
Right.
because it wasn't gonna qualify for state funding, but then the federal program came along that was going to qualify that project for, and that's why it moved up, and it surprised some people that it moved up so quickly, but that's the reason. It was the one project that we had on the list that would not otherwise qualify for traditional funding. Now, since then, the state has changed some of the funding methods.
Right.
Back then, it was an 80-20 split. Now it's a different program process. But I mean, that's the other caveat that Mike didn't really talk about. But if a special funding source were to come along, whether it's federal, pass through the state, or whatnot, some of these projects may move up and be brought to you sooner because of that opportunity. But it's hard to predict. We just don't know when those programs will come along. And in the last couple of years with COVID, it's been a unique situation. A lot of dollars have flowed out to states and down to communities like Seward that normally, water tower is going to be help paid for, those kinds of things.
So on Columbia, if in fact that's gonna remain a main arterial north and south, and is it on here to cause didn't you say that the substructure of Columbia isn't the best?
Oh, no, Columbia's been redone.
Yeah.
It's in good
Columbia
shape.
itself, not
It's
South
okay.
Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
South Ohio.
Okay,
But north, that portion has been done.
okay.
So I'm sorry if I misspoke there.
From
No,
30,
that's right.
from
I probably
34 on up north.
From 34 north.
Yes.
Right.
34, south of 34 is
So
red.
that's in good shape
Yeah.
now, they can handle.
It's a local road, it's not a tremendous, we have the wastewater plant down there, so
Right.
it takes some truck
But
traffic.
he's saying
He's
from
Yeah.
34 north
From
is in good
34
shape.
north.
That's been we've actually,
They-
paved over that.
Right.
They ripped up all the brick under there, or whatever it was
Yeah,
before.
correct.
They
It's
did
all,
correct- they
yeah,
did
that's
correct
all normal
the
substructure
old
now.
substructure.
It's all good at this point in time.
And then one last question.
Sure.
On the East Seward Street redoing the brick, is there any plans, or is it possible at all to widen that a little bit without,
So the issue that we
Encroaching on
found,
anybody's-
the issue we found, we've had it surveyed when we did Lindell survey, we had the lower portion surveyed, so and we referred to the plat maps. The right of way, it's a very old right of way, it's actually two separate plats that we used there at that section of East Seward. 31 to 32 feet of total right of way. And so if that was a collector street, our standard is 32 feet, state standard for a collector street is 32 feet back of curb to back of curb. So anything, even as narrow as Carroll K, the new section 27 feet, would require right-of-way acquisition for every home, every parcel on East Seward. And so the idea here would be for that particular, maybe we call it historic stretch. We talked about other things, prohibiting trucks on that section, we haven't got there yet. Other methods, encouraging traffic, otherwise maybe Lindell and Jackson will take a little bit more. Reportedly it has with the speed bumps in place. So the proposal is to essentially leave it at the width, 20 feet, very narrow. But it's very difficult to acquire more, and of course then if you widen it, it's not just going through the right-of-way acquisitions, the trees, everything else, changes the
I
entire
wasn't thinking
character.
that much wider, just like a foot or two.
Okay, well, and then, so within that range, a foot or two is potential, and of course, we haven't designed the project, so it's essentially just getting it on the right fiscal year, and then as we approach typically 2 years before we start to do survey, geotech, analysis, and do borings, and then the year before we generally do design. And then we often learn a lot in those 2 years prior to the project, so we don't wanna, set the project scope before we actually go through that process, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions or comments? Thanks, Mike. This is a public hearing, so I'll let the public comment portion of the public hearing. Again, from the public wish to comment on item number 4. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Marcia Carl. I live on 194 East Seward Street. I'm happy to hear his comments. I'm hearing about East Seward Street. We want to keep our historic street. We don't want it to come into a freeway. Okay, as I looked over the 1 and 6 year plan, I was a little bit perplexed. We've been talking about this here. In the past meetings, over the last couple of years, there has been grave concern over the amount of traffic on Concordia. However, I don't see anything in these 1 and 6 year plans that are really addressing the issue here. With the platting of Prairie View, there was talk of a north-south road, which seems to be on the back burner according to these plans. I'm hoping it's something that can get moved up. You keep talking about extending Prairie View. I know we've talked about a road from roundabout over to Hillcrest. That involves a bridge, very expensive, but the city basically owns, I think, most of that land through there, so it's not like you're gonna have to have land acquisition, so I think maybe that's something to be looking at. I guess I was a little bit put off by spending a couple $1 million on paving Bluff Road and 252, which are county roads, which I can't quite see that's gonna have a lot of impact on what we currently deal with. Here's some numbers. Housing units. Ridge Run has the potential to have approximately 70 homes. Valley View, 40. Prairie View, 170. So that's like 280 homes. And where are the majority of these people going? To the schools, ball fields, new fitness center, churches, hospital, all down Columbia, along with all the other traffic. And how are they currently going there? 2 options. Highway 34. All these people are coming up 34. Some of them are going straight, some of them are turning, which is causing a big backup of traffic on Columbia for people that want to turn east. A lot of these people are coming up East Seward Street, which causes a backup of traffic entering or crossing Columbia. So I just don't quite see how this whole paving of 252 and Bluff Road are going to be an essential help to the city itself. Yes, maybe for traffic that's coming in from outside of town, but how about inside of town? I think that's what we need to be looking at. I would say use these funds to invest in a road that benefits the current